But welcome to the point time count service count for Orange County. Feel free to ask questions as we go along, or pop questions or comments in the chat. And we'll start off with a little bit of background about the point time count itself. So just first off, a little bit of context of kind of why we do a head-by-head count of people experiencing homelessness in our community. One, it helps us collect required data and submit that to HUD. HUD uses that for a lot of their community planning and kind of budget requests, and it's really also communicated to Congress through the annual homelessness assessment report. And Orange County data gets looked at and compared with communities across the country, and also looks at how Orange County is doing when it comes to previous years, and informing some of our system performance measures of ensuring that homelessness is rare, brief, and one time. So again, it's a really fairly reliable snapshot of homelessness on any given night in a community. Traditionally, it's held the last Wednesday in January. The reasons for that tending to be that January tends to be a pretty cold month, and really trying to, that is a night that for most folks, if they've got other options of doubling up with family or friends, that is a time of year when people tend to double up or things of that nature. So this really gives us a chance to count folks who kind of have no other options, but are really kind of driven into sheltered situations or unsheltered situations. It also helps us establish kind of an estimate of what the community needs are and develop some of our basis for funding. The Partnership to End Homelessness is really committed to getting that most accurate number because we use it so extensively in our reports to the county commissioners and the local municipalities and elected boards, as well as community groups. And then lastly, and also I'd say most importantly, it really provides an opportunity for us to outreach and provide connection to needed resources to people living unsheltered. In Orange County, we started having a year-round street outreach team in the fall of 2020. Kind of prior to that time, we really didn't know what we didn't know. And so with the advent of the street outreach team, it really allows us to get a sense of how well embedded our services and supports are to folks living unsheltered. In 2022, for example, the street outreach team had a kind of known existing relationship with, it was about 90% of the people that we counted that night. That just lets us know, how else can we continue to reach out to folks? How else can we support folks? And we'll talk about some things that are similar to last year, but also different than last year in just a moment. So again, when we talk about how we use the data that comes from the actual surveys, that survey data is aggregated and used to create community-wide reports, including our homelessness data review that I think some of y'all were able to join us. We typically hold that early summer, June or so, when we share our point in time count data as well as our system performance data, as well as housing inventory and some of our other required reports. Like I said, we also use it to inform decision-making around homelessness funding as a system. Do we put a lot of emphasis and support and funding into permanent housing options like permanent supportive housing or rapid rehousing, because we're seeing a lot of people with some pretty serious service needs or a number of kind of or trimorbidities around health and mental health and substance use. Or do we see a lot of kind of people who are more newly experiencing homelessness and families, and so that leads us to focusing more on coordinated entry and making sure that there's solid access to homeless services and supports more broadly. So that's just kind of an example of how we would use some of the demographic data that we collect and aggregate. Like I said, we submit data to HUD as required, and then also, I think most folks on this call are familiar with the concept of coordinated entry, where we have a standardized assessment process that gets a sense of what someone's vulnerability is and then helps make those connections to relevant resources and supports. I know many folks have spent some good time with us in the Home Committee. This is that chance where we make some of those linkages. So talk next, looking at kind of how we've used this data and how this contextualizes in years past. Folks who participated in point in time count in January of 2022, we saw that there were 103 people living in sheltered environments and 30 people living unsheltered in Orange County. I don't know if folks remember, does anyone here remember what January 26, 2022 felt like? It was a cold night, shockingly. It wasn't, the coldest night, but I think it was in the upper 30s or so, around 7, 8 o'clock at night. Also, for a little bit of context, in January of 2022, our congregate shelters were in the throes of pretty significant COVID outbreaks. And so we're in COVID outbreak status per the Orange County Health Department. And so we're diverting new intakes into the system. As a result of some of that, Orange County Housing and the Partnership to End Homelessness kind of created, as Kat likes to call it, 2 pop-up programs, cold weather expansion for a lot of folks who have been camping out at the IFC Commons, as well as a COVID isolation kind of non-congregate hotel-based program for folks who were COVID positive, who had been in a congregate setting in the IFC shelter or who were experiencing homelessness, had come through the UNC emergency department, were newly positive with COVID and had no other safe place to isolate. And so we had 15 folks in a cold weather expansion kind of shelter and another 5 folks who were in COVID isolation. So this 103 kind of captures folks who were in the IFC sheltered programs plus the Orange County shelter programs. One thing to note is that we have made some pretty significant investments and expansions within our homeless system, within Orange County, including starting coordinated entry, bringing coordinated entry from the Community Empowerment Fund in-house to the Partnership to End Homelessness, seeking and being awarded expanded funding through the Emergency Solutions Grant and the ESG COVID grants, really moving funds from a model that was not a kind of best practice permanent supportive housing model to really expand rapid rehousing to quickly serve folks. And with all of those things happening and with 25 or 30 stakeholders at the table twice a month during our home committees, we've really not seen these numbers budge. And so, yeah, that's part of where we have the power and kind of the wisdom of the COC when it comes to thinking about what does our flow look like, that even with all of these investments and really great working collaborations, that these numbers are pretty stable over time. Any questions about that before we move into a little bit more kind of specifically about the counts? And welcome, Melissa. Thanks for joining. All righty. So when we are talking about the count itself, like I said, HUD requires us to have a point in time count annually. HUD requires an unsheltered count at least once every 2 years. Although Orange County has persistently had a an unsheltered count every year that I can remember. So when we think about who gets counted and how, first and foremost, folks who are living unsheltered on the night of Wednesday, January 25th. That could be folks living in their vehicles, in abandoned buildings, in parking garages, in tents. Those folks will all be counted as kind of a head-by-head count. And then there's 2 other pretty important components to consider. One is the point-in-time count sheltered count, which means that everyone who's in a HUD-funded shelter, so that could be like IFC Home Start, IFC's community house, including some of their expanded cold weather cots, any non-congregate shelter like SSVF, the Supportive Services for Veterans Families, has a kind of small shelter. all of those folks are going to get counted in the point in time count sheltered count using data that lives in the homeless management information system. We'll talk about the third component next with the service count, but just want to kind of highlight here that there are, when we think about people experiencing housing crises and homelessness, we're really kind of counting like the tip of the iceberg there, with folks living unsheltered and folks in shelters. This count does not count people who are in group homes or transitional housing, or things like Oxford houses or long-term treatment facilities. And it also doesn't count folks who are at risk of homelessness, people who might be couch surfing or doubled up, or privately paying for hotels. We know that there are a lot of folks who are going through those scenarios and are able to kind of resolve a housing crisis without ever kind of formally coming into contact with kind of the HUD-funded system of HUD-funded shelters or living unsheltered. So thinking first about who does the counting and at which stage is where are folks doing kind of that part of the counting. So the street count is going to continue to rely primarily on our street outreach harm reduction and deflection team that is jointly managed by the Orange County Partnership to End Homelessness and the Orange County Criminal Justice Resource Department. Again, that team consists of 3 peer street navigators and a clinical coordinator. And again, this team works with folks day in and day out, partnering, developing housing plans, providing harm reduction information and materials, making service connections and referrals to healthcare or mental health care, partnering with adult protective services or other components. At times helping folks get into shelter, and more often than not, helping folks get directly from the streets into housing. We look most predominantly to the street outreach team because they have been developing relationships with folks kind of day in and day out. And so again, know where the people are, know what folks' preferences and needs may be. And then this year, really looking to supplement our outreach and expansion, primarily looking to some of our kind of partners in this work, such as crisis responders who have a lot of knowledge of folks living unsheltered. We're also starting to get more and more calls from kind of further out into the county. And so I know that our homeless programs coordinator has talked with the street outreach team about really trying to start to increase kind of our rounds and relationship building in some of our parking lots in like the Walmart Mebane and places in Southern Orange down towards the Chatham line. So again, primarily that unsheltered count is going to be our street outreach team with potentially some support and assistance from the Chapel Hill Crisis Unit, the Criminal Justice Resource Department, some of our partners at HUD. Piece number 2, that sheltered count, it's really depending on administrative and program data that's already entered into the HUD required database. It's HMIS. And then we'll also get de-identified aggregated data from our DV service provider that's operating in Orange County. Compass Centers, DV service providers are not allowed to enter data into HMIS, but they do maintain their own system. And so we'll get de-identified aggregated data from Compass to inform our sheltered count as well. And then kind of the real purpose for today is really focusing on that service count. And so really as continuums of care really take a big tent approach because people experiencing homelessness also interact with a lot of other systems like the healthcare system and schools and law enforcement and food justice and faith-based communities and all kinds of things. We really look in order to have a real thorough count to really focus on a head-by-head count for the week after that point in time count night. Questions about that before we talk more specifically about the service count? Alrighty, so first, I just wanted to share a little bit of kind of a flow. We've got this linked on the partnership's website as well. But really ask that you and your staff ask every client who comes in the door between Thursday, January 26th and Wednesday, February 1st, the question of where did you sleep on Wednesday, January 25th? And again, the reason that we ask for that is that we look for that really kind of specific anchoring. When HUD has allowed us to ask and do that service count for 1 week after the pit night itself. And also we know that, you know, all of our memories, human memory is a little bit fallible. And so, you know, we start to just lose accuracy over time. And so it's harder, it gets harder and harder the further away we get from Wednesday, January 25th to pinpoint, you know, where we might have been at a given time. And so if someone says, you know, that they were, you know, staying in any place that's not meant for human habitation, like outdoors, in a vehicle, in abandoned buildings, or, and this is, I think, the really kind of important part for you all, in a hotel or motel that's been paid for by a program, not privately paid for, but paid for by a program like schools or churches. I know that the local reentry council at times has been able to assist with hotel funds. The Department of Social Services at times can help with hotel and motel funds. You know, question number 2 is, have you already completed the point in time count or the PIT survey? Again, it's a 2-question survey, it's a 2-page survey. We talked in a planning session a few weeks ago, and so folks had interest in providing both a paper survey and also a kind of a web-based survey. And so then, and we'll link through here. But then if folks say that they were in a shelter or in transitional housing, then there's no need to kind of proceed there. So again, kind of the expectation is that we are asking these same 2 questions of everybody. Again, probably don't need to tell you guys all this, but you know, we are not great guessers at like who may be experiencing homelessness or living unsheltered. And so by taking a universal approach, we know that we're going to be able to do a much more accurate job with our count than having kind of a randomized sampling. Any questions about that?
So would this be something that we'd be asking people as we interact with them as a crisis unit, or is this something that in a specific event where we're going out to do, like, meet the community members, we'd be asking these 2 questions?
Yeah, good question, Terry. This would be just kind of in the normal course of business. So we'll kind of talk at the end for folks who are interested in participating in the unsheltered count. That's again that night of Wednesday, January 25th. These are the 2 questions that we ask that, you know, given the nature of y'all's work, ask that you use your skills on de-escalation or kind of attending whatever the immediate needs are first. But then when that kind of initial kind of precipitating event that's brought them in contact with crisis has resolved, we'd ask that you then share and say, we're asking folks, you know, we've got more kind of language on the survey itself that I'll share with you, but we're asking everyone, you know, where did you sleep on Wednesday the 25th? And if you say that you slept unsheltered in those kind of locations we already talked about, asking folks, have you already completed the survey? Good question.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah.
Hi, Rachel. I have a question about the survey part. I think on that on the slide it said they could do the telephone survey or they could do the 2-page handout. Was it the 2-page survey?
Yep.
Or survey on the phone. Sometimes some of the unsheltered will give you answers that it's not quite clear. So I'm saying, like, if they haven't done it on a phone or the laptop, I guess the 2-page survey will be available. Will this be something we'll have on hand or something?
Yep. It's this flow chart is already linked onto the partnership's website, and I'll make sure that for everyone who's kind of attending today, that I'll share with you kind of where the link is. I know that Sarah's got it. The PIT survey itself, we're kind of in the final stages of doing some formatting. I'll kind of share with you where it is right now, because we've got some things that are new for this year. So there may be some more minor tweaks in the next couple of days,
Okay.
but we'll make sure to distribute paper copies as well, so that you've got them as you're kind of out and about.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I know, Laverne, you especially kind of hit the streets, so tap the tools you need.
Okay.
Yeah, good question. So again, for a couple of things that are new in 2023, first we want to share that HUD has kind of directed a change for this year, that we used to just report on, whether or not folks are under the age of 18, whether they're young adults considered 18 to 24, or whether they're 25 and over. New for this year, and this doesn't actually change the survey at all, it just changes a little bit of kind of the way we report back to HUD on the partnerships end, is we've gotten some more specificity in those categories. Because we know that, young adults, folks who, are in the 25 to 34 category may present with some very different kind of needs and lived experience than folks who are 55 and 64. When it comes to lived experience and kind of life goals, but also kind of housing needs, and also the housing resources that are open to folks. I think a lot of the folks that we're working with living unsheltered, who are in that 55 plus category, that actually opens a lot of doors. And so this information is going to be really helpful. When it comes to some changes that we've made as kind of at the partnership level, we added their system gaps this year. We got some feedback from service providers and community members about a month ago about a preference towards having folks kind of pick their top 3 rather than kind of rank ordering all of the system gaps, because there are a lot. And then this group also provided some feedback and input that it was helpful to have kind of both and, that it's easier out in the field to kind of have an app or kind of a cloud-based survey. But also we know that sometimes, folks have had a variety of experiences with systems and sometimes feel kind of nervous or apprehensive about kind of putting information into kind of the system. And so they may want to actually kind of take a look at the survey. And so having a paper copy can also be quite helpful. So going next into the survey itself. The point in time count survey form is 2 pages, 16 questions, and we estimate that it'll take about 10 minutes or so to complete. Starts with some more information about you as interviewers, and this information is helpful just in case I need to reach back out to do some just some data quality checks, or if things are I don't know about you guys, but as a lefty, I've got some chicken scratch, so sometimes doing a little deciphering is helpful. And also the interview location and date and time is also helpful when it comes to jogging memories and helping us with some of our deduplication efforts. Like I said, there's 3 methods for how participants can really kind of choose how they share information. And so one is that someone is saying like, yeah, feel free to ask me whatever you want, or like the person provided input for the survey. The other is that someone is like, yeah, Dewan on the street outreach team knows me, you can just ask him. And that's where we can pull that information, that demographic information from program files. And then the other scenario is that someone didn't wish to complete the survey or situation didn't permit it. So for example, one of the teams that went out last year encountered somebody who appeared to be asleep in their vehicle. The vehicle and the person did not seem known to the street outreach team, so there was no way to kind of go back for additional program info. And so the street outreach team made some kind of broad estimates about sex and race and age. And so again, we're definitely not looking to we want to really highlight again and again and again that all participation and answers into this are voluntary. If all we have is that there was a person, it's hard to tell, all of those demographics living unsheltered, that's okay. We can we can kind of extrapolate from the other data set or from the rest of the data pool, some of those demographics. That's an okay thing. Again, the really two key points, or sorry, the key point is really, where did someone sleep on the 25th? And if they answer, unsheltered or kind of a sheltered situation, that's great. We'll continue on to ask the next sets of questions. And if someone says that they were in a hotel or motel paid for with their own funds, they were in jail or prison or youth detention, they were in some type of treatment facility, if they were in a house or apartment that they rent on their own, or staying with a friend or family member, we would not continue serving at this time.
Quick question about this section. If someone says like the option of using program files, if they say, this person has my information, how do we collect their name so we know how does that work? Because I noticed there's no section for name here.
Yeah, good question. So this was a snip from the actual survey itself. So I will actually going to pause this for now. Let's see if I have a link actually to it. Nope. Okay. I'm going to pause real quick and pull up the, actually, you know what? Let's do this. Hannah, can we put a pin in that? And then we'll kind of go through the actual survey itself. Okay, great. Realizing there's just a little bit more, and then we can read through the survey itself, see what questions and feedback y'all have. Again, surveys can be completed with full, partial, or no input from participants. Again, really want to kind of empower folks that no's are okay. Again, it's a pretty quick survey. On the night of the survey itself, for our unsheltered count, we do have some bags of supplies and things that we'll be traveling with folks, or traveling to distribute with folks. Again, really want to remind folks again and again that participation is voluntary, that responses are kept anonymous. So to Hannah's point, we do ask for a little bit of identifying information, but then that's just used for deduplication purposes. But then the responses are aggregated to the other folks that we encounter. Folks can stop the survey at any time. And then new for this year is that we're also using feedback to really inform our planning around system gaps. In years past, when in 2017, 2018, when the partnership first kind of convened a series of conversations to create the homeless system gaps, we were asking folks, service providers may have very different perceptions of needs than people who are currently kind of surviving and have lived expertise of our systems. And so the Orange County Partnership Leadership Team and some of the other stakeholders, like elected officials and other community members, find this really valuable to learn about some of the gaps of our own knowledge and the ways that we are kind of prioritizing certain elements. So really, really want to highlight for folks that this is a great opportunity to really give feedback. Again, we can use program file info to complete surveys with client's consent. We really want to make sure that we're asking everyone the last question about follow-up. Like I said, we know a lot of folks out there, but I guarantee we do not know everybody. And so we really want to make sure that that this is an opportunity to connect folks with services and supports if they're interested. And then lastly, we also want to kind of bear in mind that what for some folks may feel like just kind of a demographic question on a survey, for other folks may feel very loaded and very sensitive. And so when we're asking about questions like health and substance use, we'll want to reinforce that they can skip any answers they prefer not to answer, that responses are kept anonymous, and that responses also can be just a yes or no answer, that we're not looking for a lot of detail, but really just trying to get a sense of what our community members and what our neighbors' needs are. So to that data point about both making sure that, again, when we have an accurate count, that we are not double counting folks, and then also what those next steps are. We will deduplicate the surveys once they're all collected. And so that's where it's really important to get as much information as possible on the surveys. But even more importantly than that, you're kind of putting whoever the surveyor is listing a way for partnership staff to get in touch with them if we have any questions. We're also asking the folks to complete one form per respondent or client. That's either the paper copy or the online form, but not doing both. Again, I will deduplicate them, but y'all would help me out to no end if we only were doing one form per client or respondent. And yep, if you're doing the surveys electronically, we've got an easy way to import that data. But if you're doing paper copies, we ask that you scan them and email them back to me by basically 9 days. I'm sorry, two days after the service count is done. So it would be Friday, February 3rd. And I'll send out reminders because I know I like a friendly reminder as well. Or if you have any trouble or difficulty getting them to me, I'm happy to come out and grab them from folks live time. So any questions about our deduplication efforts, completing the survey itself, and then kind of returning that survey to the partnership? Cool. And then, yeah, just want to thank folks. The PIT count really informs our funding, our planning. Some of our colleagues who we work on the community as what's called collaborative application during every COC funding cycle. There are a lot of questions that come specifically to the point in time count and to our system performance measures. So having a thorough count is really critical to our planning. And also really want to highlight again and again that survey responses really help amplify the expertise and perspectives of folks with current lived knowledge of our system. We use this information a lot. I know there are a lot of barriers for folks who are currently living unsheltered to making sure that their voices are heard and getting in front of elected officials and other stakeholders. And so this is a really great way to give those perspectives their due and make sure that they're being used to shape policy and funding decisions. And then you all know how to get a hold of me. So I am going to end this and go into the survey itself. Any questions before we go into the survey? Cool. There we go. Alrighty. So, Sarah, can I get a thumbs up if you're seeing the survey? Love it, thank you. So this is the part that we saw before with how folks are providing input, your contact info, and then where someone slept on the night of Wednesday, January 25th. We got some skip patterns here. The other thing I want to note about this, asking folks who are in treatment facilities, which again, you all may not come into contact with, well, crisis unit may, our colleagues at UNC sometimes do as well. But we're really looking at, what's considered an episode of treatment is up to 90 days of treatment. So if someone was experiencing homelessness prior to going into that facility, that may be someone that we would be able to count in our point in time count.
So you said that it would need to be 90 days?
No more than 90 days.
No more for them to be considered unsheltered
Correct.
or homeless.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
And I know in talking with some of our colleagues at Freedom House and Horizons that many folks did not have stable living environments prior to going in for treatment. So next question is asking really to determine kind of what is that kind of the HUD category of, are you currently sleeping in this location because you're fleeing domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking? And then to Hannah's question, to kind of really help us deduplicate or pull later from the program data, if we need to, is asking folks if you'd feel comfortable. We'd like to ask some identifying information that we'll use later to make sure we're not counting the same person twice. So we'll ask for the first 2 letters of someone's first name, the first 2 letters of someone's last name, and then a date of birth or age. And because we've got both the homeless management information system, but then also our OC Connect system that we use for our by name list staffing, those are really 2 good kind of rich data sources if we need to get further information, demographic information about folks. Then using our HUD categories here when it comes to gender and ethnicity and race. We're asking specifically about kind of veteran status here with have you ever served in the U.S. Army or recalled to active duty as a member of the National Guard or Reserves. Next couple of questions get to duration of homelessness and really chronic homelessness, which is defined as experiencing homelessness for a year or more while also having some type of disabling condition. So asking folks when their current episode of homelessness started, and then asking how many kind of separate episodes or instances did folks have? Again, when asking if someone has been diagnosed with any of the following conditions, again, we're not looking for a lot of kind of narrative here. Folks can just answer with like a yes or no. And then asking folks some information about household, about kind of their household status and composition. So asking folks, you know, on tonight, you know, what best describes your living situation as a household without children, a household with adults and children, or a household with only children. I can't remember a time that we've come across a household of only children or folks who are 17 or younger, but certainly is a possibility. And then asking about pets. While shelters, IFC, you know, will allow folks to kind of take both service animals as well as emotional support animals. We know that folks living unsheltered tend to be more likely to have some pets or companions out there than other folks. Asking about income from any sources, including, you know, what's the approximate amount that someone has per month. And sorry, I need to actually move this chart up. But that final question that we're asking about really is, would you like someone to follow up with you about housing and other services? And so just making sure that we've got a good way to connect with someone. If someone doesn't have email or phone, you know, ask them what's a good way for them, for our street outreach team to get connected. You know, it could be a, you know, I go to the Commons, the IFC Commons for lunch, or it could be I charge my phone at Weaver Street or something of that nature. Or so we'll make sure that we've got information that you all could distribute as well. So I need to move this chart up a little bit, but this also allows us to gather demographic information about the broader household. So again, what's folks who enter data into HMIS know that this relationship to the head of household is a pretty critical question. Again, first 2 letters of first name, first 2 letters of last name, age, and then gender, race, ethnicity, veteran status, whether someone's been diagnosed with a disability, and whether or not they've been experiencing homelessness for the same amount of time approximately that the head of household has. Any questions about those pieces before we kind of go into the gaps for a moment?
For the head of household question, so I'm thinking, you know, if someone is homeless and has a child, but that child isn't in their custody or is in their custody, but doesn't live with them, or, you know, stay with them or live with them, just all the different kind of possibilities. So in what cases do we collect that information, and in what cases would we not?
Yeah, good question. So the operative word here for sure is what describes your family's living situation tonight. And the reason that we ask that is that when we go back and submit our point in time count data to HUD, if there is conflicting information, then we kind of get dinged in the sense that we need to like correct or explain that information before that data upload is accepted by HUD. So for example, if there was if there was a female head of household who was staying in her car by herself but said that I had I've got two kids and they may be staying with a friend or family member, we really want to make sure that she gets counted as a single adult without children, because that's who's living unsheltered on that night. And the same for other kind of peer placements or other kind of other placement scenarios there may be.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, not a problem. And that's, I do want to say that that household type has been pretty durable in Orange County. Again, folks who are familiar with our data review event, that I should probably look it up. Let's see. 92% of our household types are households without children. So either a single adult or an adult couple without children. And that's been pretty durable over time. Alrighty. So the next piece, and this is new for this year, so we'll see how it goes. And if we need to make some changes, we'll do that. But it's question 16. We're working to fill gaps in the Orange County homeless system, and we'd really like the perspective of people currently experiencing homelessness in Orange County. Please pick 3 of the most important gaps you see, and feel free to add if you don't see what you'd like listed here. And so this, we've tweaked the language a little bit to make it just a little bit more kind of user-friendly and kind of layperson friendly, but we've got our same categories of gaps. So, our gaps of housing itself, temporary housing, services and connections, and then services kind of rooted in dignity. And so we're asking that that folks pick the 3 most important gaps to them. I don't know if folks would it helpful to kind of read through and then think through, like, if you're kind of envisioning talking with somebody, out on the sidewalk at night, or in, in the CJRD office on Thursday or Friday morning, whether you could see kind of reading these off to folks or kind of handing it to them, or kind of using some keywords. Again, and trying to get away from kind of like really program heavy language. I think we lost some of the brevity that we have in our kind of gaps headings.
It might be helpful to read through them just to kind of get familiar.
Okay. Yeah, and if y'all have any feedback, again, this is not carved in stone just yet. So if there's any feedback y'all have, feel free to share it. We're asking folks to pick the 3 most important gaps, and feel free to add if you don't see what you'd like listed here. So the first category, we've got housing that's affordable at all levels, help with paying rent ongoing, and a case manager to help find and keep housing, more permanent housing specifically for people fleeing unsafe situations, help with rent ongoing and a case manager for young people experiencing homelessness who might be 18 to 24, incentives for landlords to rent to people in programs, and household goods and furniture. The gaps in our temporary housing consist of a same-day shelter where you can walk up and get a bed for the night, more shelter specifically for people fleeing unsafe situations, and temporary housing like 60 days for people coming out of institutions like treatment, hospitals, and jails to work on finding longer-term housing. We've got gaps in our service connections, like a safe, calm place that's not a hospital or jail to resolve a crisis, like a mental health or substance use, while getting connected to additional supports. A safe, comfortable place where people can hang out, access lockers, shower, food, healthcare, housing support, and other services, and more housing helpline staff to help people who are experiencing housing crises. And then our last gaps in the services kind of dignity are funds to help with memorial services and grief support when people who've experienced homelessness pass away, and bathrooms with showers and drinking fountains that are accessible 24 hours in downtown Chapel Hill. Any thoughts or anything, just having read through that?
So with just doing this survey, whether it's on the phone or in person, are they also going to get maybe a handout with resources, or is it just the survey that's going to be done at that moment?
Yeah, that's a great question, Teresa. We could definitely, make sure that we're also distributing. Again, we've really tried to have, the street outreach team out there on the streets, from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday through Friday, on Saturdays from 12 p.m. to 9 p.m. to be that kind of first warm handoff. And then for folks who might not be living unsheltered, we've got our housing helpline. That's really our, we call it like the front door to services. And so they could connect people with short-term rental assistance, like emergency housing assistance. They can provide folks with listings to agencies that help with utility bills, or the affordable housing listings, things like that, so that you all are not kind of burdened with a bunch of paperwork. And also, we know that folks who are experiencing unsheltered homelessness are also less likely to be able to kind of manage all the paperwork that goes along with that.
So like if you're, let's say, doing that survey and they start asking about some of these resources, we would just direct them then to SORAD or the housing helpline. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. And I will say that some of these resources, they're here because there are gaps in our systems. We either don't have the thing, or we don't have enough of it for all of the folks who are experiencing homelessness in our community.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Yeah, great question. Other questions or comments? I'll make sure, Terry, to add handout for y'all for SORAD and housing help. Alrighty, well, I'm going to stop our recording.